So in this next part, we'll be animating the gifts. So for the gifts, I'm gonna have to make some layers, and I'll grab what's necessary for this animation. Alright, so I'm gonna need to grab my presents, my globe, and also my cache files that'll allow me to define the inside space of my globe. I am going to copy and make a new composition, and I shall call it gifts clean, and I'll paste them. Now I'll get my cache. So I'm gonna start preparing my scene. So currently my presents are attached to my globe, and we need to simulate their movement. So I'm gonna delete their connection to the globe. However, I need the inside of my globe. This cache here is attached to the animation of my globe. We're just gonna change this slightly so that it stays all together. And now I can start by creating the interior of my globe. This is so that my presents stay within the boundary of the globe. So for this layer, I'm going to grab the layer illustrator, and I need to create a vectorized version so that Newton can detect its boundaries. This is super simple. You just need to use the create function and click on create shapes from vector layers. And now I have this layer here. So we just need to see inside this layer. And there are my borders. But I don't need this square one, so I'll just delete it. And now I need to remove the filling. And I'll just replace it with a contour. Oh, so if I can't do it like that, I'll need to add it manually. Just gonna stick it in the cache so that we can see it. Okay, now I need to move the ground for my gifts, because the presents now cross a boundary and need to be sitting on the ground. So I'm just gonna edit the border of my globe. This won't change anything visually. I'm just moving this so that my presents sit on the boundary. I can now hide my globe because I don't need it. Alright, so the idea for this part of the tutorial is that the presents move around the globe, but I would also like for the ribbon on the boxes to move like they're individual objects that aren't fixed in place. You guys should know that Newton doesn't deal well with flexible objects, only stiff ones. But I'll show you that we can actually do it with Newton thanks to Puppet by After Effects and just a little bit of DUiK. So the idea is to create objects that will take the place of the bows on my gifts, and these will interact with Newton. So we're going to use the tool Puppet in After Effects to place points that will reattach to these objects, and to attach them we're going to use DUiK. So I'm going to start by creating a series of objects that will take the place of my bows. So I'm going to create a series of ellipses. I'm going to create 3. I'm also going to redo the anchor points for these objects. And I'm also going to fill them. Whatever color you want, I'm just going to position them here. Exactly the same for the second bow. Sorry, not the same. They need to be different objects. This one's going to be the second. I need to recenter them. And on this present here, actually, I'll rename it loop. For the last object here, I'll just make it smaller. We're not really gonna see it. It's just for the principles. Great. Our objects are placed, and I can now trace a mask for my presence without the bows. And we can now go into Newton. So right away, I'm gonna fix the precision of my sphere. It doesn't need to be perfect, but I would still like if it were quite precise. And this object is going to be Kinematic, because it's controlled by the animation in After Effects. At first, we're going to see this. So I'm going to change the gravity because it's now like water and I want it a bit more real. Now going to Solver, and I'm going to change the substeps to at least 10. This will allow for more precise animation. And finally, I'm going to modify my presence. First, some color, and then I'm going to add some damping. It will allow for a bit more control over their movements, and we'll start with 1 and maybe some angular at 0.3. All right, what do we get? Okay, it's not 100% what I want, but it's a really good point to be at. I think that maybe I need a bit more damping. Stick it around 3, maybe 5. What does 5 give us? Okay, it's still not quite there, but we're gonna go forward, and you'll see how I can get more control over the movements and change it completely. So what I need to do now is simulate my bows and fix their collision with the border of my globe. And to do this, I'm going to use one of the joints, the wheel joint. The wheel joint is going to allow me to attach the bows to the present and have them come back to their initial starting point. If you remember, these objects were all over the place. So to do this, I'm going to select my present and the first part of my bow. Right away, I'm going to add some suspension. Take it to, 2. And I'll do the same thing with the other present. What do we get now? Okay, so we can see here that my objects are attached and that they no longer fly all over the globe. But the bows were bouncing quite a lot, so let's fix that. I'm going to select the wheel joint and add some damping. Okay, so there are some problems. I don't want my bows to collide with each other. So I'm going to select my bows and then go into my advanced settings and change their collision groups. They're all in group A, and I'm going to change their settings so that they can no longer interact with other objects in group A. Included in this group A is the globe. So I'm going to make sure that it can no longer collide with any object in group A. And I'm going to make the globe be in group B. Okay, what do we get now? Cool. Now, the length of their movement is too large. I want to limit this, so I'm going to do this by adding a few piston joints. So I'm going to select my objects and select this joint. And these joints are going to allow me to create limits for the length of travel for my bow. So select the pistons and click here to add the limits. So the lower limit is going to allow it to go as low as my present, and my upper limit won't go too far, just about there. And from here we see this. So what's interesting about this is that my objects are resisting the environment. So here, I want to add some substeps to have a bit more control over my objects. So if I add a 1, you'll see that my simulation is not the same at all. Now add another one. I'm not quite liking how my presents are colliding. I really want it to seem like they're on different paths. So what I'm going to do here is make it so they can't collide. I'm going to change their substep. I don't like how they seem to be superimposed. And I'm just going to go back and forth a few times until I'm happy with where the substeps are and happy with the movement. So I found a substep that I liked, and now I have also changed the suspension of my wheel joints, and I put them to 4 so that they're a bit more active. And I also have these substeps at 12, which I found to be good for what I wanted here. So, now that I'm satisfied with my scene, we can now render it. Now, back in After Effects, I'm gonna rename my new composition Gift Sim. And I can see now what this gives us. So the next stage is to make my objects puppets. I'm gonna add the bows of my presents and then duplicate them. And then rename these bits so that we know that they are just the bows. Now I need to actually add my bows, and to do this, we need to invert the layers. So we now have it there, but we need to add something extra. Now, to make sure that my puppet's going to work, I need to make a mask. And now I can make my puppet. So I add my objects back in, and I'm going to add some pins on my layer gift L knot. One here. One in the center of each object, and a final pin here. So if I move this, it'll move my bow. And if I attach my pin to this pink object here, then it will automatically move my bow. To do that, we're going to use the tool DUiK. Effects, Puppet, Mesh, Deform, and then select the two pins that I want, Puppet pin 2 and 3. I'm gonna rename them so it's easier. And select them. Open up DUiK, and now we're gonna click on Add Bones. And this is gonna make me 2 pins. And if I move these pins, it's going to allow me to move my object. So I can now create an alignment between my 2 objects' positions. And if I hide my pins and my pink object, the bows now move automatically with the animation that we made in Newton. This is great. So I'm just going to move the mask a little bit so that it can cover up any gaps between my present and the bow. And we can now do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to add my object and make a mask. Change the expansion just a little bit. I'm going to clean the present up right away. And now some puppet. One pin here. The other in the center again. Maybe some more mask. Make it just that little bit cleaner. And same as before, giving it the same movement that it had in Newton. Some DUiK, and I can join everything together. Now, I think we can all agree there's a lot less to see on the second present. But it's good. I like it. all that's left for me to do now is to integrate this with our main animation. Replace my presence with gift sim. And what does this give us? And now we can move on to our last part, the animation of the snow in the globe.